Today's meeting of the Environmental Advisory Board is called to order on April 17th. Welcome, everyone. Thank you. The members of the Environmental Advisory Board were appointed by the City Council. We serve voluntarily, and the board's objective is to provide citizen insight to the City Council and staff on environmental activities within and affecting the City of Clearwater. Agendas of today's meeting are on the wall at the entrance to the chamber. And please remember to turn off your cell phones and electronic devices. To ensure a complete record, we ask each individual wishing to speak to clearly state your name and spell it for the clerk. Will members of the board and staff please introduce yourselves? We'll start at the...
Sarah Kessler, staff liaison.
Candace Gardner.
John Thomas.
Jared Leone.
Ashley Pimley.
And we're without board member Mark Wright. Our first order of business is to review and approve the minutes of the board's last meeting. Members, are there any changes or corrections?
I just had a question and one clarification.
Yes, sir.
On the item number 4 about the Cooper's Point field trip, I didn't know if it was proper just to parenthetically note that the meeting was subsequently postponed, at least for the record.
Well, but the minutes were correct.
All right.
Yeah,
Yes.
because at the time they were, yeah.
All right.
that's right.
For somebody looking at it to look back. And then regarding some statements I made about the bicycle trail, I thought it might be helpful to indicate that it was the one on Druid Road, which it just had the newly completed bicycle trail, and to add in on Druid Road.
All right. I guess with the one correction, or do we make just a single correction then for that? With that, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion.
Any second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the minutes are approved. And then citizens to be heard on items not on the agenda. If there's anyone here to speak on items not on the agenda, and we do have someone here to speak on items not on the agenda.
Norm Lupo, Clearwater, and I'm smiling.
I'm sorry, what did your last name?
Lupo. Right, that's Italian. Good afternoon. As I said earlier, I think I wish more people were here. Nonetheless, I think we're all on the same page, caring about the environment. And of course, we're here to talk about Clearwater. May I step forward, Mr. Chairman? I have copies for you can read later,
Oh,
but
sure. Thank you.
it's the crux of what I'm talking about.
Please don't talk, but you're not at the
Is this copies for everyone or just one for? Oh, okay. Yes, can you?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? I wouldn't if it's.
When you walk away from it.
Oh.
Yeah, I think it's just one copy of everything. So.
Speaking of
Thank you.
audio, it was very difficult to hear you speaking a minute ago. I know we're no longer in City Hall, but I'm a veteran and I lost some of my hearing in the service, and I apologize. I'm not wearing my hearing aid, so if you could speak up a little bit, I'll try to do the same.
Yes, sir.
This is twofold. Of course, our topic today is the environment in Clearwater, but this is applicable to Clearwater and statewide, which I handed to you. I just called Tallahassee, and I did speak to Senator Joe Gruda's office today for an update. Senate Bill 218 is still in committee. Whether it's going to move out of committee for a full House and Senate consideration and vote, no one knows at this time. It's all on that sheet. And the bill, all that information is given to you. I've asked our county commissioners to support this. It's for a win-win. It's for the greater good. It's about enhancing the environment. I was second vice chairman in Sarasota County for many years, keep Sarasota County beautiful, volunteering like you have, and countless cleanup, litter walks, And frankly, I'm just disgusted walking our beautiful, pristine beaches and seeing all these cigarette butts accumulated. The public beach is not an ashtray, and people, unfortunately, should be more responsible, but since not, some, our Senator Joe Gruters has asked for this legislation. I would ask you to support this, as I would our City of Clearwater 5 council members. Again, it's not about me, it's about our environment and the city that we love. And secondly, I got 31 seconds, like the old TV show, Beat the Clock. Of course, you're a lot younger than I am, no one remembers that show. As far as, and I'm not off the subject with what is pending with Coachman Park and now the expanding seats of the, I guess they call it an amphitheater. I just took a visual out there, you know, and it seems to me that amphitheater is going to take up so much space. I'm not in favor of it. I just want to go on record for also environmental reasons. I think we need to keep the green space as much as we can. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Norm.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathleen Beckman, and I'm a Clearwater resident. I am before you today to ask for your help. The council recently voted to proceed with a large amphitheater as part of Imagine Clearwater. The size of the amphitheater has been a contentious issue, with many residents being concerned about the impact that a larger size venue and events will have on the environment, traffic, and noise. While I value the potential economic benefit of events, I also value the environment and the quality of lives of residents that live nearby. City officials should always be balancing economics, the environment, and residents' quality of life. As a result of that, I would respectfully request that experts be consulted and a study be performed on how the current Imagine Clearwater plan will impact the environment, traffic, and noise. Please immediately request to the council that a comprehensive environmental impact study be performed. Traffic is already unacceptable around this section of Clearwater for many months of the year with no solution in sight. How will the construction of a large amphitheater impact traffic and parking? How will the larger amphitheater impact the environment? Communities all over the nation perform environmental impact studies before proceeding with work on this scale. Truthfully, many states and municipalities require that such environmental studies be undertaken to protect governments from litigation and future costs of unanticipated consequences. Why is this an important step? Because these large projects impact residents and our shared environment in profound ways, both now and for many years to come. In 2014, the Urban Land Institute did a comprehensive study on revitalizing downtown Clearwater. They made numerous recommendations that the current members of City Council are disregarding. The residents of Clearwater paid over $100,000 for this study by experts in urban planning and implementation. One recommendation in particular was that the city should not rush out to request RFPs, but should work collaboratively with stakeholders with an emphasis on residents. And they recommended the city hire a project manager to head up this all-encompassing and very expensive project. Imagine Clearwater, with its multifaceted effects on the environment, traffic, businesses, and quality of life, needs to be done right. Prudent steps and precautions in the early stages will help to ensure that it is both a success and an environmental enhancement, not an environmental liability. It is not too late. You can make a difference. Please advocate to the City Council that they review the recommendations of the ULI study and that they commit to performing an environmental impact study for the Imagine Clearwater project. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Is there anyone else who wants to speak on items not on the agenda? Please step forward and state your name.
Glenn Wentworth, I live at 2227 Hard Boulevard, Clearwater. I would like to talk today about a project that's going on. We're speaking for Suncoast Sierra Club, that we're thrilled the that there is, for the first time in our knowledge, renewable energy is being considered for the North Greenwood Rec Center, since solar is being considered, and a proposal has been set forward by Solar Source. Our concern is that that proposal is extremely expensive, and we don't understand why. It seems that the proposal, we've consulted with several experts, including Alan Brand, who is an engineer and a solar consultant, and also some other solar companies, to try to get a sense for why this proposal has come in at such a high, really inflated price. And let me just give you an idea of what we're talking about. I installed myself solar in my home last summer. I have 6 kilowatts of solar array on my roof, and I paid $1,850 per kilowatt. Solar Source is coming in charging $3,350 per kilowatt, almost twice as much as I paid for my solar array. Their inverter system is with the same company as mine, Solar Edge, which is an excellent company, and with the same monitoring system. I have panels from Germany that are, tier 1 panels. So there's nothing that would explain why this bid came in so high. We have been in communication with John Helios, asking him to get more proposals, and we haven't had a response yet back. But it would be a shame to just leave it at that with one proposal for the rec center, and then throw up hands and say, oh, solar is too expensive. So that's our request, and what we would request from the EAB is if you can advocate, please, for more proposals to be sought for the North Greenwood Rec Center. Any questions?
Thank you, Glenna. I don't know if anyone else has any questions or anything about any of the speakers. I had a couple of statements if anyone else didn't. Yeah, I think that's interesting. Have you talked to the Parks and Rec Board as well about this? The advisory board for the Parks and Rec Department?
Brian Beckman's doing this. He's the one who's in contact. So all I know is that John, he's been in contact with John Helios.
I think it's Jim.
Is it Jim? Oh, James, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, I think that might be a good route to go as well, to make sure their advisory board knows about this.
Oh, their advisory board.
The Parks and
Okay.
Rec advisory board as well might be a good
Fair
thing.
enough.
Yeah, and I think it's great for us to know about these other solar projects. We've talked about this at other previous meetings about trying to incorporate solar in parking lots and other things. So to have that going on at rec centers, I think is a great idea. But yeah, if cost is going to make it prohibitive to continue to do something like that, it could be a problem. So
Cost should not be prohibitive. Solar.
Right, and so if it's
the prices are down, and this is a highly inflated proposal, we're really concerned about it. I think also looking on like a big picture, that what Sunco Sierras would like for the city of Clearwater is to take into consideration the triple bottom line. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's a UN policy. It's an accounting method that the UN uses which considers economic, societal, and environmental factors, and the impact of all three of those for any project that goes forward. And it would be lovely for that to happen with the city.
Thank you very much, Glenn.
Thanks so much.
And I did want to make one comment or maybe it may turn into more than one, but as far as Imagine Clearwater, I believe it's very early still in the planning phases, so I don't know how an environmental impact study so soon until they know the scope of what will be put in the park and the other accessory uses for the park. I don't know that it's a thing that we should weigh in on until we have more information as to the scale of and scope of the project. I don't know if anyone else has any comments to that.
Having done quite a few environmental impact studies over my career, I think most of the environmental impact studies are encouraged to be done early in the planning study and design process. And I think, they're at an appropriate stage at this point in time, that a lot of the issues such as traffic, parking, with the definition and decisions that have been made on the scope of the project, a lot of the design details are still yet to come. I was planning to speak during board members to be heard on one particular issue that I was a little concerned about, but I'll share it at that point in time. But I would support recommending at least moving forward with some of the studies related to traffic, parking, noise. There's quite a number of other issues. I'll touch on some of those later on.
Okay, so we can circle back to that then at that point. And then I think we've also talked about cigarettes on the beach and that being a major issue. So I think we'll follow that legislation closely, but yeah. All right. Okay, so we'll move on to new business. Oh, do we have another speaker? I'm sorry, please.
Lisa Lanza, Clearwater, Florida. Yes, I think we are, since, as Kathleen was saying, I think it was Kathleen, that they're moving forward with the request for proposal at this point. And Wade Hamilton in particular is pushing for us to go ahead out for a request for proposal. How can we be doing that if we're not this far in the plan? We are way far in the plan. They're making some serious decisions, in particular the biggest one that they've made recently, which a lot of people thought when they were voting for that referendum back in 2016 or 17 for the expansion of the park. They did not realize at that time that at some point this was going to come forward, which was a 5,000 covered seat amphitheater. A lot of people have been blindsided by that. People on the stakeholder committee had no idea this was going to happen. There were some of us who did think this was going to be the ultimate outcome and are not surprised that it is. But obviously that will have, for the birds, I've been talking to Clearwater Audubon about it, that huge stage with the rafters, birds fly, birds roost. There's so many issues, and a lot of them are environmental. And when they did change the ordinance, Florida Special Act 1925, and they changed that was state law, Chapter 11050, they did not do an environmental, the environmental impact study that was done at the state level said there was no environmental impact, which there's clearly an environmental impact. So it was pushed through the state, it's getting pushed through the city, and I have come to this board many times and said, why is it that we're this far in the game and this committee has never, not one time, been given a presentation? It's shocking, to tell you the truth. And I'm really surprised at you, Jared, that you would say we're not far enough in the game, but that's my opinion. I do want to say, though, I'm very happy that Harbor View was knocked down, because the view now is spectacular. And you can stand on the roof of the Capitol Theater up there in the, I don't know what they call it, the rooftop area, and you could watch the Christmas parade. And so, I'm not against everything as some people are trying to propose that I am. I'm not. I just think, like Kathleen said, we need to slow down. We need to look at the situation. We need to know what we're doing and why we're doing it. And we actually spent $400,000, not $100,000, for the first consultant. And then recently we had the second consultant who was paid $44,000 to do the market study. And he didn't even agree that 4,500 seats was a good idea. He came back and said 2,500 at the max would be, we might make money or come out even. And as you know, there's been a request. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Okay, any other speakers for items not on the agenda? Okay, we'll move on. Okay, so we have, our next item is, the wetland mitigation in a neighborhood park presentation from Catherine Corcoran. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, I'm Catherine Corcoran. My official title is Landscape Architect for the City of Clearwater Engineering Department, but I need to put an asterisk both on your sheets on the agenda and in my video that I'll be displaying, because I have completed 4 out of 5 parts required to call myself that. So I'm not officially Landscape Architect. For today, we'll call me Project Manager for City of Clearwater. There's a legal issue with that. That's an official designation, like saying professional engineer or doctor. So I always want to correct people when we mistakenly attribute that to me. So I'm here to present to you what we've done over at Coachman Ridge Park. It's just a couple blocks north of Spectrum Field. We made major changes out there within the last year. And the first question that we always want to address is, what the heck was wrong with the park in the first place? Why on earth will we go through all this effort to make these changes? It looked just fine before. This was certainly something that, environmentally and fiscally we would have liked to avoid if we could have done it. We're completely removing and replacing the existing solid waste transfer station, which is just down the street from this site. That site exists in a floodplain, and so we're very limited in what kind of stormwater impacts we can accommodate on a site like that. It's kind of like making your pool deeper. It doesn't allow you to handle more rain, right? So we were allowed by the DEP to accommodate the stormwater impacts within the same watershed, which fortunately we owned the park just down the street, and so that was very convenient. We got very lucky. So the entire purpose of this was to accommodate the stormwater impacts made by the new solid waste transfer station. Does anybody need me to address what exactly that is, like why we have that? I'll do it anyway. The garbage trucks that come to your house are, by comparison, very small to what takes your trash to the landfill. So we get all our small garbage trucks that have come to your home, come to a station, and they dump that stuff into a pile, and that's loaded onto much bigger trucks, and that's what goes to the landfill, right? The last time the facility was updated was in the 1980s, and so you can imagine how much the neighborhood has expanded, and the city as a whole. So the needs to accommodate that trash have grown. The facility became unsafe, and I think we can all agree that the people who are doing this work for us deserve to have a safe and reasonably sized facility. Speak up. Oh, I have a microphone?
Or raise the volume.
Okay, I can do that.
Well, I think Kevin.
It's as high as I could go.
I'll just be louder.
Okay.
Okay. So we started to accommodate the stormwater impacts, of course, with a plan, and so up on the screens behind you, are you able to see that anywhere else? No. So I'm going to ask you. Oh, you can see here. Great. Okay, so this is the existing conditions, or what was the existing conditions. This is what we started with. It's a lot of trees. They were all pretty similar in species and condition for the most part. We have very limited trail system that really just cut across the belly of the park from Old Coachman Road to the Long Center. We also have a basketball court, a tennis ball court, and a racquetball court, in addition to a small playground. And the small playground was relocated by the Parks Department ahead of our work. It was actually me in the Parks Department getting myself out of my own way, and then I transferred to the Engineering Department and kept working. So we moved a couple of things around. Any tree that you, or any spot on the map that you see that has an X through it, that's a tree to be removed. We did need to remove about 300 trees on site to accommodate the work. Many of them were in poor shape. Hurricane Irma did a number on the area, as we all know, and a lot of these trees were becoming old and they had structural issues or disease issues. We saved every tree that we possibly could. There were no fewer than 5 arborists, myself included, who reviewed the site as a whole, every single tree on the map. We all evaluated it, and anything that could be done to save trees was done. All right, so we did have to lose about 300. And this was the goal in doing that. Okay, so we have an artist rendering in the top left of aerially what we would expect the park to look like at completion. Okay, and we have, this was printed and posted on the park site in 2 locations because we had a lot of residents. Of course, the first phase of construction is demolition, right? And that's very painful to see. I've got a couple of photos of that. But this is what we put up so that we could tell them, like, this is what we're reaching for, right? This is what it's going to look like. This is the painful phase. I call it ripping the Band-Aid. This is the goal. Okay, so you can see a lot of green space. You can see we're going to have 2 wetland mitigation ponds. It looks like a brown sidewalk going horizontally. That's actually a boardwalk, and that boardwalk is represented on the lower section of the illustration. So that's what it should look like when it's done. right? And you can see people using it, walking on it, gives you a sense of scale. And you can also see we've drawn the trees in at different heights, right? Because when they're planted, they're babies. They're about as tall as I am, which for a tree is very small, no thicker than maybe 2 thumbs put together. And so we've represented the 5-year and 10-year anticipated height so that you can see this is going to grow up to be into something, right? And there are a couple of reasons for that. Number one, it's a lot cheaper to buy smaller trees. And number two, they respond much better to being transplanted than larger trees, have a much higher success rate in the long term. And in addition, the third thing is that when you plant a tree of a smaller size, within the first 5 years of planting something maybe 2 or 3 times as big, we know through research that in about 5 or 7 years, they will be the same height, just because they slow their growth rate as they get up, okay? So like in the very near future, the effect will be the same as if we had spent a lot more money to get bigger trees in there, right? So you can see anticipated completion, November 2018. We have a couple little things that we're wrapping up. This always happens. But we have had the park open for use for a couple of months now. And you can see we used to have just a trail system cutting through like what I described, the belly of the site. Now we have the trail system going completely around it, so people can make a loop. And there's also a couple of cut points going through, including this boardwalk, which I'm going to show you how it turned out. You can compare it to the rendering. And we describe, what are we doing? So I said we cut out 300 trees, we saved about 200. We're planting 1,711. Okay, that's the point where people who were frightened by what they were seeing calmed down a lot, right? That's a huge increase. And we're also adding a lot more biodiversity to that. In addition, in the wetland basin areas, we're adding almost 12,000 wetland herbaceous species. Right, you can go out there right now, it's all installed, you can see it. It is beautiful. We've got a huge array of plants that we're putting in. I've got the plant list that I'm going to show you so you can see the diversity that we're adding. And we also provided a list of places where site users, the neighborhood residents, could go and use the similar facilities while we had the park shut down. So we weren't just taking it away, we're like, it's shut down for now, but if you're here to play basketball, this is somewhere else you can do it. The Parks Department is going to be replacing the basketball court after my portion of work is finished, so currently that's not on site, but they're anticipating doing that as soon as I'm out of there. All right, so here's a close-up view of what we want that boardwalk to look like, kind of at the bank.
Can we get that back on the screen here? Thank you.
There we go. Perfect. So that's just a zoomed in version because it's kind of hard to see at the bottom. So like that's the feel that we want to provide for our users. We want it to look just like this. If everything goes to plan, it's going to look like this when we're done. All right, so this is the wetland mitigation ponds 1 and 2. So we've got a larger one, and then its twin is much smaller. And you can see that there's different zones of planting. The landscape architect, the actual landscape architect who we hired with the design firm, he zoned these out, and these are different plants that are accommodated to different levels of inundation of water. So we have different zones, like different rings going in, and that's how they were planted. And you can see this is the list of species that exist in those ponds. Significantly more than just a couple of, there were numerous live oaks, but just live oaks, laurel oaks, and turf grass. Right, this is a huge increase in biodiversity, and these are very environmentally valuable plants, right? So, one of the big questions I get about this list is why are there no water lilies? Everybody wants to see the water lilies. The pond isn't deep enough, that's why. There's not enough distance between the water surface and the root system to accommodate water lilies. We would have loved to do that, but I think you'll agree this is a pretty extensive list as well. All right, so this is the upland area landscaping plan. So this is where we did invest a lot of money into large trees. These are trees that came in whose root balls were about the size of the podium I'm standing at. They were, I think the minimum we had was a 4-inch caliper. These were very, very large, and we had very many of them. I think in total we had about 300 that we put in the upland areas. And the impacts of that are immediate, right? You can drive by and you can see them all lined up there along the street. They're doing great. It's spring. I had been holding my breath because we planted them several months ago, and now I'm seeing this huge flush of growth out on site. I was there today, and I did a happy dance in the car as we drove by. So everything's doing pretty great so far. So that's the northern section, and that's the lower half of the park. You can see the small mitigation pond. And then this is the plant list for the upland plantings, right? So you can see we've got hickory, slash pine, longleaf pine, sycamore, live oak, bald cypress, and then a number of shrubs and low-growing plants as well. So again, a huge improvement to the diversity on site. All right, so there's ripping the Band-Aid. Like I said, this caused a lot of concern. I was very happy to have a conversation with all the residents who called me about this, and I think you'll agree it's better to live in a community where people notice this and care and call someone about it than to shrug their shoulders and say, well, no big deal. So very happy to have that conversation with them. And this was digging out the smaller wetland pond. So this is our boardwalk going in, of course, starting to take shape over the big pond. And we're going to switch to the video that'll show you exactly what it looks like today and while they were planting everything for it. So this project, this is Coachman Ridge Park, and the project was made necessary by the changes taking place at the transfer station down the street. The transfer station exists in a very low-lying area, so the stormwater effects that are going to come about as a result of that work required that we accommodate more stormwater elsewhere in the same drainage system. So we built this pond and a smaller pond. Its twin is on the other side of the park here. And as you can see, we've got a beautiful boardwalk that goes across the planting area. Our teams are working right now, and in the coming weeks, they'll be finishing up with a bunch of trees, and they'll be planting the outer areas that we can see are not planted yet, because those are higher level zones. Initially, the residents were very concerned with how many trees we took out. We did have to remove about 300 trees from the site. Some of them were damaged by Hurricane Irma. Others were, not in good shape because they were getting pretty old. Everybody was really upset about that, and we regretted seeing them go as well. We did save more than 200 trees on site, and in the wetland areas alone, we'll be planting nearly 1,500. So we're making up for the loss, and then that doesn't even include the trees that have been planted in the upland areas here. So in all, we're effectively, I think, tripling, if not quadrupling, the amount of trees that are on site. We're very excited to get this project completed because we've provided a much more usable space here on site. We've got this extended trail system, provided a beautiful boardwalk for everybody to come and enjoy this new wetland space. A lot of wetland species of animals moved in before we started planting, and they'll be back as soon as the water comes back up. And we're very, very pleased to provide a space where people can use more of the park than they were previously able to. I'll be happy to take any questions you have for me about the project.
Any comments from the board?
Sure. I like the project in terms of the wetland itself. What do you have in terms of a plan for maintenance and things like primrose willow, torpedo grass, and the other unwanted
Right. And there were
plants
cattails
that
were
might
sprouting
come in?
Yeah, even before we got to the planting
Yeah.
portion, cattails were like, hey, this looks awesome, we like it too. Oh, I'm sorry.
I like cattails. Cattails are very good for stormwater treatment.
But they're invasive.
Well,
So, yeah, part of the permitting process was that we put a maintenance plan in place. And so with our DEP permit to do this work, we are required to maintain an 80% survival rate over 5 years for the herbaceous, that's the low-growing plants, and then 10 years for all the tree species. So they'll be inspecting that routinely, and we have an existing pond maintenance contract. We have a company who does that for the city overall, and they'll be bringing this into their fold as the project comes what we would call online, as we officially release it back to the Parks Department. In the meantime, we have noticed some of those undesirable species popping up. They like it too, and so our contractor is being required to use the same company that we'll be using right now so that we can head that off. We're not just going to let it get overgrown and then say, here you go. So yeah, that's going to be an ongoing effort.
that I know.
Yeah. Anything else?
Any other
No.
comments? I think, yeah, it turned into, what was not a great opportunity, to
Yeah.
turn.
Lemons out of lemonade.
Yeah, certainly.
Would your vision of this in the future be something similar to what one might find going through the boardwalks at Cape Park?
Exactly, yeah, that's,
Yeah.
fingers crossed, that's
That
exactly what I
one's
see for
very,
it, yeah.
very nice
Yeah.
and well done. I'm concerned with those shallow depths that invasives battle's gonna be,
It's gonna be an ongoing problem.
right.
But we're prepared to handle it.
And do we have any comments from the audience? Oh, please step to the, please step to the podium and state your name. And you'll have 3 minutes.
Lena Wentworth,
Yeah, thank you.
Clearwater, Florida. I was just curious because there were bicycle trails through here, and now they're not, right? You're saying the bicycling is gonna be on the outside. Can you bicycle into the lawn
Yes.
center?
So
Was
it's
it
still,
across the
it's
boardwalk?
all still open to bicycles, and we don't have it delineated, bicyclists here, pedestrians here, but it's all
Okay.
connected to the Ream-Wilson Trail. So all the Ream-Wilson Trail uses apply to the trail system in the
Perfect.
park.
Great, thanks.
Great question.
Thank you.
Anything
Any
else?
other comments?
I'm Facebook Living this, so we have to turn it off, I guess.
Oh, yeah, please.
Lisa
Oh, thank you.
Lanza, Clearwater, Florida. I think what happened here was, because I have a lot of friends in Coachman Ridge and across the neighborhood across, and I have a bicycle group that meets at the Long Center and ride that trail alone, and we just love that park.
Oh,
And there was old growth there, it was habitat, and you really haven't addressed that, the fact that there was habitat disturbed. I don't know if you did, a study to see what animals or birds were nesting in there. I hope you did do that, right?
I wasn't part of that. I do know that, like I mentioned in the video, that there was a lot of wildlife that moved back in, to the extent that the contractor teams knew what time of day it was based on where different birds were in the park, because that was to me a sign like, it's time to wrap it up, guys. If you are catching on to the daily routines of the ducks in the pond, and you know that it's 2 o'clock because they're in between the 2 ponds, and when they move to the smaller pond, it's time to go home. So yeah, we have turtles, we've seen very small gators, we've seen fish, and a lot of the birds have come in, and I have residents who tell me that they see small mammals there as well. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
So also, this comes back to the Clearwater Environmental Advisory Board, that you were not made aware of it. And this is the board that really should have a chance to see this before it happens and be aware of it, because you are our representatives when it comes to environmental issues in the city. I want to be able to pick up the phone or email and say, hey, what's going on at that park? And yet I think no one knew about it. Even my friends that lived in Coachman Ridge were shocked. I mean, one lady, I heard, Mary ran, across there screaming, and then I saw another guy, he was Facebooking live, Scott was screaming. So it's a matter of letting us know in advance, so at least we could ease on into it, and maybe even have some good input. The citizens, this board may have had some good input. And I think it comes back again to the board only meets quarterly, and but still, there would have been time, and I would like you to ask, why wasn't the board informed of this? Because it was a big impact on the community. A lot of people were very upset about it. And the last thing is the grass. I'm not sure why you would plant grass all the way down to hit the water line. Normally, you don't want to have grass, on the hillside.
So if we had nothing, it would be an erosion
No,
issue.
not to put nothing, but to put, some type of native plants along the edge of the pond
Yeah.
versus the grass right to the water, because are you gonna mow it?
Yes.
Because if you do, then the grass is gonna go in, then you're gonna cause eutrophication, and, so normally in an environmental project like this, it's not normal to put grass all the way to
Right.
meet the
So
water.
we're balancing different needs. 'cause
Yeah,
we still-
I don't want this to be between you and me, because it's not
Well,
supposed
I
to.
want to address your concerns.
Yeah, but address it to them.
Okay, so the issue of the turf, we worked with the Parks Department very closely on the design of the park, and it was determined that we wanted as much space of the park to remain usable park space. And so these slopes were designed to be mowed very easily and to be easily walkable. So the design intent is that you can walk down these slopes comfortably and sit on the banks of these ponds. We don't expect the water level, unless we're in a very serious storm situation, to get above that interface of the wetland area and the turf. So that was part of the decision.
Okay.
Anything else I can address?
No, thank you very much, Catherine.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Yeah, looks beautiful. Very nice.
Go out and see it. I recommend it.
Yeah, and I think to Lisa's point, I believe we had someone from Solid Waste speak to us about the changes at the transfer station a couple of years ago. I don't know how much they talked about the mitigation project itself, but I know that we had someone speak about the overall project. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item. It's the discussion of the Red Tide Forum.
Yes, I did not attend. Were any of you able to attend the Red Tide Forum?
Argos and I made it.
Excellent.
I made it.
Oh, great. Yeah, I thought it was a really well-attended event. I thought it was really informative, and I like the format of it with all the experts going through. So I don't know if you had any comments about it.
I think there's still in somewhat of a mystery as
Yeah,
to the,
yeah,
the true
certainly.
cause of the red tide. And as I guess I learned a fair amount, and that they indicate that the bloom actually starts in oligotrophic waters, which are the nutrient deficient waters out deeper in the Gulf. And then bloom starts there. The one scientist that indicated that it might be a global thing that sets it off with dust, iron-rich dust that's coming from the Sahara Desert, airborne, that gets deposited, and that might be one of the micronutrients that triggers this bloom. That was one of the things that was raised as a supposition. Did they have any hard data? That's really it, but that was one scientist's hypothesis, I guess. But a lot of the other discussion really focused on nutrients, basically from eutrophication, nutrient sources coming in from the land, and that might exacerbate the conditions along the coast. That it bloom started out there in the Gulf, kind of moved south towards Port Charlotte, and then came north, as far north, I guess, as Tarpon Springs might have been the northern extent. But they did report blooms also on the east coast of Florida last year as well. And so it wasn't just a West Coast phenomenon or one that is starting in the Gulf. Still a mystery. They're doing a lot of work and research, but certainly has an impact on this community, and they showed some of the hotel data, I think, as well, that a little bit of a dip, and health concerns with people being able to use the beachfront during that period. So, and what was really amazing was the county's efforts to clean up the shorefront of the dead sea critters, and basically the volume of material that was removed over the course of the bloom was just amazing, and the work that had been done. So a real credit to Pinellas County and the local communities for their efforts to make it as palatable as could be.
Possible.
Yeah, again, I like the approach of the forum. I think it was almost standing room only. There were hundreds of people that went to it, so I don't know if moving forward a larger venue would be, is something to keep in mind. But I think continuing to have events like that, and if there's ways for the city to kind of continue to help with those efforts. It was a really informative, obviously, and I think a good approach to presenting the information as well. So are there any other comments from the board? Okay. Well, are there any comments from the audience?
Yes.
Okay. Please step to the podium, state your name, and you'll have 10
Lisa
minutes to speak.
Lanza, Clearwater, Florida.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask about a herbicide, Roundup, being used in the pond
Oh, no, it's speaking about the...
I know it
oh,
is,
okay.
but well, I'll call her later then.
Yeah.
It's related to, there's a lot of discussion about the potential, did they talk about this, John, that the use of herbicides in Lake Okeechobee potentially is a big part of the problem as well as?
Not mentioned.
Huh?
My recollection, I did not recollect that.
Because if you follow this, if you follow it, which a lot of us have, they've discussed about glyphosate or Roundup being overused in Lake Okeechobee as being a big part of the problem, as well as septic tanks, another part of the problem. But that was something I wanted to mention with the pond, the stormwater pond at Cochran Ridge, you know, for noxious plants or invasive plants. Will they be using Roundup, and do we have a Roundup policy in Clearwater? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa.
I think we do, don't we, in the summer months?
I think
May
it's
through-
that's phosphorus.
Fertilizer
Yeah,
ordinance,
fertilizer.
nitrogen, all of
Yeah,
Dallas County
sorry.
fertilizers should be, we don't need phosphorus in our
Yeah.
fertilizer, we already have a very phosphorus-rich soil. But the summer ban is for fertilizer and nitrogen.
Yeah.
Just for that.
And we use certified, herbicide applicators, and so they are trained onto, like, as to how to spray certain things, and so those chemicals that aren't supposed to be sprayed in the water, they do not spray them in the water. They don't have overspray, like, that's part of the rules of our contract with them, is they're only spraying that individual. A lot of companies do something called brown lining, where they go and, you know, just spray a whole area so the entire edge of a lake or something turns brown and it kills everything, and that is against the rules, and they can lose their contract if they do that. And so, herbicides that are not supposed to be sprayed in the water are not sprayed in the water, and it's very specific as to what can be used in park properties and any city property.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to the next item, an update on the sustainability coordinator position. Sarah?
Your voices have been heard. So, interviews for the new sustainability coordinator position are actually tomorrow and Friday. So they're going to hire somebody in the very near future. And so, I don't know specifically what they will be working on. I know one thing that's been brought up to city council has been green print, and so some of those things that we've talked about in green print, they're going to be looking at some of those things. I know there's been a lot of initiatives locally on a lot of other sustainability things, and I'm sure that they will reach out to Dunedin and St. Pete and all the other sustainability coordinators and probably collaborate on a lot of those local initiatives, and then also continue on some of the things that we've already started.
I think that's great. Would it be too much of a stretch to have that person come to our next meeting? I think we'll have a few months out, so.
Yep.
Does the board have any other comments about it? Any comments from the audience about our update on the sustainability coordinator? All right. Okay, we'll move on. Discuss possible dates for the Cooper's Point visit.
I am sorry we had to cancel that, but the culvert going that goes over that channel, should be finished Friday. And so they've just been doing a lot of road work out there, and it's just really kind of a mess. So things have been moving forward and cleaned up a little bit, and they're getting a lot closer. And the other thing was, with the way they did this, redid the driveway into the school, it changed our access to that property, and so we had to get a new road built out there and all that kind of stuff. Put a new gate in the fence, and so all of that has been figured out now, so we can look at a new date to go visit. I think before I think it was a Thursday, wasn't it? And it was like 3:30 or something like that. I think
Yeah,
is
it's
what we
April
had.
2nd, and it was close to the same time when our board meets, I believe.
Yeah. So is there? I mean, we could do like May 2nd, or let's see, we could do May 7th, or like that first full week of May. Does anybody have lack of availability then?
May 2nd sounds good.
Okay,
Yeah, that's fine.
May 2nd. Okay, so we will plan on meeting at Cooper's Bayou Park. That's on Bayshore. And we'll have a van available, and then we'll plan on meeting there and then driving around and going out to the park there.
And that would be at 3:30 again?
Yep, we'll meet there at 3:30.
Great.
And I sent you the link to today's agenda. And if you click on the Cooper's Point visit, if you click on that, then in that there's a document, and that is the master plan document in there. So if you want to look at that before we go out there, I have some big boards that I'll bring out that you can see where things are and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I read through that master plan earlier, and I guess that's what one of the items is they're working on now is one of the master plan items, replacing the culvert there at Damascus. So, yeah, I think it'll be great to see some of how that's coming together. And thanks for sending the master plan along. That was really good reading and trying to see what's going on or what the future holds out there. I am curious, and I guess this will probably be answered maybe at a later time. They had a bridge over, but I didn't see on that map where that was supposed to be.
That is something that Parks and Rec has talked about, a bridge. You're talking about a bridge from going Cooper's Bayou Park?
Yeah, it was like the one over
Yeah.
Courtney Camp. Yeah,
It showed on one of the exhibits.
Okay, because I thought that
There's a
had
dotted line
letters.
or
Oh,
something
okay,
like
yeah.
that.
Yeah, so there's a couple different exhibits. So there's a combination map that includes all of the elements of the master plan, and then there's one that includes just the park elements, and there's one that includes just the water quality elements. And so if you, sometimes it's a little bit confusing because you're like, wait a minute, half the dots are missing. So one of them just contains the park elements, which includes the boardwalks, that walkover.
Yeah.
I think the kayak launch was on there.
Yeah.
And so then the other one includes all of the water quality things, the dredging up there, the different channels and kayak ways and all that kind of stuff.
The dredging numbers were out of sight.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
what the cost benefit of that. If you had any feedback for us,
We
is
do
the
have a little
dredging
bit.
more or less off the table based on cost?
It's not. There are certain entities that we're talking to in the Tampa Bay area that are doing some construction projects and need seagrass credits. And so based on those numbers, if we dredge that Cooper's Bayou area, there's a really good chance that we'll get seagrass back there, and they'll be able to potentially use that area for mitigation. So we'll have to see how those discussions work out, but based on the cost-benefit ratio, it might work out for them.
Or a portion of it.
Or a portion of it, yeah.
Yeah, and one of the other items on there was expanding the culvert under Courtney Campbell, similar to the project on the
Right.
east side of the bridge.
So in the master plan, they really looked at more of a tidal gate, that it wouldn't open the road. It was more like directional drill underneath is sort of
Okay.
what they were looking at there. We have modified that plan to open up, our hope is to be able to open up the Courtney Campbell similar to what they did on the other side.
So there would be road work then?
So there would be
Okay.
road work associated with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then to that end, I know a lot of times when it rains, that beach, Ben T. Davis Beach, is usually shut down because of a lot of the storm water that is then pushing through there. Is that a consideration that will be affecting our side of the beach as well with the changes that will?
The changes wouldn't
Allow more,
impact
okay.
that side, just because it's so tidally influenced that it'll all equal out in the end. So, whatever tide pushes up there isn't going to affect the north side or
I mean,
vice versa.
I think usually when it rains, so that's a whole outfall, the Cooper's Bayou area
I see
too.
what
So
you're saying.
yeah.
So the outfalls that are in that area would drain into Cooper's Bayou, and so they wouldn't affect
On
any
the
additional stormwater, and so whatever drains on the south side is just gonna stay on the south side.
Okay.
Whatever's on the north side is gonna stay on the north side.
Okay. Any other comments from the board? Any
More to
comment?
come in the field, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, certainly, for sure. Any comments from the audience on our Cooper's Point visit?
Yeah, this is related to land that is adjacent to Cooper's Point, which is the old, or the DOT state I think the DOT offices are still in that building. It's the state office building?
They were
The
closed.
DOT office is not.
Okay.
Is not in there any longer.
Okay, so it's a state office building that the city has now signed an agreement with FDEP Bureau of Lands to sublease that building to the Clearwater Chamber of Commerce. And that if you look at the contract, it does say that that building is adjacent to sensitive lands, which is kind of adjacent to Cooper's Point, correct? So the landscaping on the outside of that building, who will be responsible for that? The city or Chamber of Commerce?
That would be a facility, like.
Because I couldn't figure that out reading the
That's-
contract.
That's not really in my purview. I have no
Right,
idea.
well, it's because it is an environment, I did send you all, some of you anyway, a copy of the contract, and it does, I can't figure out in the contract who's responsible for the landscaping, but you might want to, they might want to work with the Native Plant Society to, instead of just having a bunch of horticultural ornamental plants planted around to make it look pretty, because it is a Chamber of Commerce Welcome Center, it could be an opportunity to even expose this committee as, and other environmental things going on and events and things going on in the community. And as well, there's supposed to be a bathroom maintained in there for the bicycle trail. So I don't know, maybe you could keep an eye on that, how many bathrooms will be in there, because there are a lot of people on that Courtney Campbell Trail, and there is really no place to go to the bathroom, except for Ben T. Davis. So you've got one on that end of the park, and then Courtney Campbell Trail, and then this end. So if you can get more details, maybe have someone speak to that at a meeting, or if you can make some calls, then let me know.
Okay.
And then I'll pass it on, because I'm in a lot of bike groups. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. To that end, I know in the master plan, they noted using that building for these uses as educational facility and having the bathrooms open again for use in that general area. In that FDOT building that is now being subleased for the chamber use as a welcome center, it's noted in the master plan to have an environmental education aspect and to have that reopened as a part of that park. So I think moving forward as the park is put together,
Yeah.
we'll have more details about that.
As the trails and
Yeah.
everything else is developed,
Yeah.
then those things would be developed then as well.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move on to our old business. Sarah?
I don't know that I have old business.
Okay.
Do I have old business?
If there's none, I've just, okay, does anyone else have any? old-
No.
Okay, I know, I was just gonna bring up that we had asked in our, last about, and it was brought up again today, this use of solar, and so I think we had talked about, solar power uses, canopies over parking lots and city buildings, and in new construction and at street lights. So I guess if there's some way to find out also how that project's going on and Parks and Rec and if they're planning more at more rec facilities.
I will find out about the North Greenwood situation, a little bit more about that. I think a lot of the solar stuff is probably going to go under the purview of the sustainability coordinator.
Sure.
And so I will make sure that's mentioned. And so when they come, whoever that person is, comes to talk to you, they know that's something that you're interested in and can be addressed.
Okay, yeah, and I'm just gonna go down, there were a handful of the police and lifeguard, electric vehicles versus the gas ones that are out there, ocean-friendly special events at the city, and then, I think the septic system inspection program that you had talked about. I know that there's some talk at the state level about putting programs at local level in place or working with that, so maybe, and then the upgraded beach trash cans, including recycling. I think we talked about the big pit that they had there, so maybe if that's completed and some other plans, I don't know if that's parks or solid waste or a combination, finding out there, but I think those are some of the old business items that we had, and we'll talk about at our next meeting. Okay, so if there's no other old business, we'll move to our director's report.
Okay,
Sarah?
so at the next meeting, I'll invite the new sustainability coordinator to join us. And I'll let them know a few of your concerns, issues that they can talk about how they're planning on addressing those. Is there anything else that you're interested in discussing?
I mentioned the solar. I have a question. I don't know why we don't involve Duke Energy, because they are our power source. And if, like the rec center, they would install the solar on the rec center, and what they don't use, it just goes back into the grid. So it seems like a win-win for everyone. There's so much talk about how much the cost of battery power is for like the vehicles. I saw today that they're going to new companies merging so people can lease the like buses that because of the batteries, they don't have to pay for the batteries that way. It just seems to me that Duke Energy is talking about doing a lot of solar, but wouldn't it be just easier to on these buildings just to have them put their solar on the rooftops and be able to, what they don't use goes back to the grid. It just seems like we're going kind of in a circle with solar, and I don't know if I'm just missing something.
Okay, so we'll find out more options and include that.
That's good. Yeah.
Candace, anything other?
No, that's good, yeah, that's good, yeah.
Will you expect her to, or she or he,
Someone, no idea.
to have a report on how they're going to approach the green print?
I anticipate that they will be able to address something related to green print. I anticipate that by that time.
Probably an outline of what their focus areas are going to be
Yep.
for the rest of the year, perhaps. Okay.
For me, this will just take my comments from my board members, but in terms of for next meeting, I was out at the floating docks and saw a lot of they pressure clean the bird droppings off almost all day for, I don't know, all week long. It's I'm just curious to find out a little bit more about what is going on out there, and if there's any other options that can be used to keep the birds from the docks. And I don't know how much, again, the water use and how that contaminates I know that there's a very shipped channel there. There's a lot of boats that come in and out, but I don't know if there's some other degradation that may happen because of that, just the volume of
I
that,
can't
so.
imagine we're the only ones that have birds on their docks, so
Sure.
it'd be interesting to see how other
Yeah,
communities handle it.
and so to that end, I know in Tampa they were having issues, and they've tried some things to some lesser, I guess, success. So we'll move on to board members to be heard. Any other?
I would like to talk about the Coachman Park area. And it's just as a citizen looking at the concert area, and it's the concert stage is right on the water, and it comes up, so it blocks all the view. Could it be turned around? Could it be up by the road facing west? And that way you'd have more green space and more views when you're at the park. Or putting it on the north end of all of this, right by the library, using the library facilities possibly, facing southwest. Does it have to be right smack dab in that big parking lot? That's as a citizen, when I look at that, I think, well, this is great for that one-a-month show or every other month, but what are you going to do with kids and people with these chairs? They're going to be permanent chairs, I would imagine, and they're going to be running around, and you really should wall that off. And if you had it into a little bit of more of a corner space, wouldn't it be easier to manage? Just as a citizen, I'm not an expert, so.
Well, you just set me up, because this was one of the things that I wanted to talk about, is taking off of Kathleen Beckman's comments about an environmental study. And one of the things with environmental impact studies is the exploration of alternatives. You know, one of the issues, and I reviewed the video from the council workshop earlier this week, and you know, the issue of noise is there.
Sure.
So which is the better, you know, way for the sound to be projected? Out towards the water or back inland to the
Yes.
residential community?
But there's
And, you know,
noise
that
now.
right, but there's noise now. But you know, you need a noise study to do that. And you know, are there impacts that you know are worthy enough of any mitigation or orientation of the design? The designers may have already explored those things. We don't know. It just hasn't come out. But I think, though, you know, that's an issue that you bring up that needs to be studied and addressed. One that came up in my mind was after the Red Tide Summit, I got interested in seagrass. So I wanted to see, you know, so I went to the Tampa Bay Water Atlas that the University of South Florida has. And it shows the seagrass in Clearwater Harbor and St. Joe's Bay over a period of time. They go and click on a certain year and it shows you what the seagrass was. So I looked at the area around Coachman Park. And it's been in decline since basically the Marina Way. All right, well, boat traffic, props, etc. So I said, I know if I was a boat owner, and I've seen this, I know from my experience living in Boston area for a long time, the Boston Pops plays on the Esplanade, the park on the Charles River. Well, the boat traffic is crazy because people can come, they don't have to deal with the crowds, they moor their boat, and they listen to the concert just like everyone else. So I went down to the dockmaster the other day and said, hey, do you get people mooring out here, you know, during some of these concerts? Yeah, it happens, you know, right out there where that sailboat is right now, that's where they moor, the seagrass beds. So, you know, it's an issue there that, you know, should there be a navigational or mooring restriction in that zone, because the seagrass is indicated to be close to the shoreline there. And now it's a discontinuous patch, no longer a continuous bed of seagrass. You know, is that, you know, an operational issue for the concerts that, you know, requires the Coast Guard to say, yes, you can restrict mooring here and put out navigational, you know, restrictions, but you know, that's the kind of thing that an environmental study that's more broad and comprehensive will identify and, you know, be able to say, okay, you know, how do we manage the resources that we have in the best way? There are a lot of other, you know, issues similar to that. I think that Kathleen touched on traffic, parking. If you just said, okay, you got 4,000 seats there, all right, say 2.5 people per car. I mean, right?
That's a lot of people, that's a lot, yeah.
You know, all right, so now you're looking at 1,600 cars.
So, yeah, so
All
where
right.
do they park?
An efficient parking ratio is about 125 per acre.
Ooh,
All right, so you're looking at over, you know,
So you need a
10,
high rise.
you know, close to 15 acres of
Or high rise.
of parking. You know, does it have to be paved, or if it's not paved, it's still an issue with, you know, landscape and just turf management, et cetera. But you know, where do you put 1,600 cars or 1,500, whatever the number is? You know, there's issues, I think, regarding to security and safety there, and, you know, fencing of that area. There's also some potential very positive ones in terms of pedestrian and cycling circulation, some linkages and connections that will be markedly improved, at least the way I've seen the current designs. There's issues related to stormwater flooding, storm protection. You do the design, the pieces, and but those are all things kind of the back of house. There's conflicts with the ferry operations, perhaps. I don't know. I saw during construction they may move the ferry over to the Seminole boat ramp, but the intent, I think, is to have it there. For the vendor and food service, we've talked about plastics. We're going to have restrictions down there on the waterfront. I know when I talked to the dock master the other day, she readily brought up the issue of the solid waste that they see, and the windblown stuff that comes in following the events that are held down there. So I think that's a big issue with plastics coming in, and how do you deal with that? So I think the design is certainly at a stage that a lot of these studies or issues could be explored, and alternatives begin to be determined and evaluated to evaluate any impacts or how mitigation could occur to make it the best facility that's going to protect the resources of the city. So I don't know if it makes sense for this board, as our title is Environmental Advisory Board to the City Council. Do we recommend that they begin to some of these studies may have been done. They're just, I can't find them on the website or in any of the other materials, but I'm sure the consultants have certainly touched on them as they've done their work. But where are we with them? Is there a public process that would be held rather than at the end, where the focus is on a lot of other issues? But is it appropriate for us at this time to recommend a study? It's a very complex site and project with all the uses and operations there, and I think it certainly merits serious consideration of all those kind of issues that I mentioned and Kathleen mentioned as well.
I think it would be wonderful for the city. I would love to see it. I just would like to move it to a different location so that there's the green space, because the Coachman family gave the land for the people for green space, and I don't know if they really were looking at taking that whole area and making it a stage.
Talk into the microphone.
Besides the location of the pavilion, there was at the council workshop, there was a presentation on adjustment of some of the parking, and one of the proposals was to dead-end Cleveland Street, basically down the bottom of the hill, rather than having a parking lot in the center of the park. And that parking would be moved over, basically where I don't know the name of the street offhand, but over towards the causeway and the bridge, and aligned along parallel to that roadway that comes in. I think that makes a lot more sense to keep the parking at the periphery. I've been involved in a lot of park planning over my career, and know a lot of parks that have much larger sites than this that don't have parking in the middle, and the parking is on the periphery rather than trying to bring people in just so they can be right next to the facility. But it's such a small little parking lot when you look at it in terms of the overall uses. So I think that would be a great change, and certainly one of those kind of issues that could be studied as part of an environmental impact study. Where is it best to have this parking? The city council clearly has been spending a lot of time and being very diligent in their review, but public involvement, and I think the advice from our committee, that's our charge, would certainly be warranted on some of these matters.
Certainly, I think, and I'll just be brief. I think that we should have some input into the process at some point. I think some of the elements have changed in just the last year and in the last couple of weeks. So I think some of those studies would be outdated at this point. So I don't know at what point do they say, well, our design phase is these are the features that we want to have, and we need to understand what those impacts are going to be based on the realities of the project. And so I agree that we should have some input and some stake, in the process. I just like I said, I think some of the parking study and some of the other things have been incorporated into the design. They had to, I think, for some of the estuary and other aspects to the initial designs, they would have had to consider, I think, some of those elements. But yeah, it would be good to find out. But I don't know as far as how far along they are in that process, and maybe Sarah can enlighten us.
I don't know what studies have been completed. I don't know if they have done a technical NEPA impact study. I have not seen one. I mean, usually those are pretty big and they address everything, but those are usually things that you do when you're, in your initial design phase to help you make these decisions. So I don't know if something's has been done as far as, an extensive environmental impact study. I mean, based on what you guys are talking about, I don't think it would be out of line for you to request to see it if it does exist, or for one to be done if it doesn't exist. Just because your concerns are in line with what your purview of the board is. And so.
Is there a point person that we can have address these issues at our next meeting?
Well, isn't the environmental specialist, isn't that partially what he's going to be doing for
The
us?
sustainability coordinator?
Yeah,
It's a totally, I think, different focus than the sustainability coordinator.
And I don't know if that would be.
Yeah, so the person who's in charge of it is Micah Maxwell. So he's assistant city manager. I don't think it's probably appropriate to have him here. I think it would probably be better a project manager or something, but I just want to, for you to think about how quickly some things are moving along with this Imagine Clearwater, and you guys aren't meeting again for another 3 months. So to have somebody come and address you is, your concerns are gonna be different in 3 months.
Sure.
They're gonna be, they might be the same ones, and there might be different ones, because, it just seems like they're making a lot of changes.
Would it be appropriate for some of us to go meet with Mr. Maxwell and, just discuss some of these concerns or issues to provide some advice?
Probably the best thing to do would be to write a letter on behalf of, submit a letter to the council, and articulate some of your concerns, as an advisory board,
Well, I was thinking, we might learn a little bit more about the work that's been done that's not out there, rather than to write a letter that, okay, we've done all of this, but, and
if you would rather have a meeting, I'm not sure.
I agree the letter is appropriate. As the
But you want
follow-up,
to do more than the letter.
Right, I think we need to learn a little bit more, and that we haven't been able to do so here at our meeting. It might be best to meet with Mr. Maxwell directly.
One person.
Only one.
Otherwise it has to be a call.
Right.
That's fine.
Right.
So, okay, so do you want to meet him first with the potential to write a letter? Prior to your next meeting, is that what you're thinking? So, John or.
My thought would be have our questions addressed by whoever at our next meeting. Find out what the study has been, what studies have been done, what haven't been done, what all of those, and then in a response, we'll have a letter to, and do that after that. But I think it'd be good to have that at one of our meetings in public purview, to have anyone else that may have insight or, interest. I don't know if that's okay.
No, that makes sense, yeah.
And there's things like the seagrass issue that could be dealt with right now.
Yeah, it's hard to
You know,
wait
is
for
is
3
that
months.
something that could be started, for, the concerts that are gonna have to continue to happen until, a new facility is built? It's not just,
Yeah,
it's a current issue.
Yeah, I think mooring, regardless of concerts, has been an issue for a long time, and that's one that will, I think, continue to be an issue. So. Yeah, and then it's just exacerbated as other events because you have the additional boats that come in. But yeah, if that's, I think, an acceptable process, let's do it that way.
John, I see that you have a lot of notes. If you want to, I wrote down your bullet points that you mentioned, but if there's something that you want to send me that has more information that you want addressed, just send that to me, and then I can make sure that is
Yeah,
addressed.
I don't really know enough
Okay.
to
All right.
say,
I
this
wrote
is
down
what
your
the scope
bullet
of,
points, so.
those are the, the typical topic areas.
Okay.
Topic areas. But, I think one needs to learn a little bit more. Typically, a lot of these environmental studies, the way you start is what they call a scoping document. Information about the project at this stage where it is now, gets publicly reviewed, and, there's, an assessment of really what are the issues. Some of these may not even be issues at all.
Yeah.
And, then what really needs to be studied, and in what way, what alternatives should be explored. So.
Yeah, and I think to a point you sort of brushed on, there's been a lot of activity in that area now for many years. So, some of the environmental impact, it's there already, and it may not be changed because of the park. The park may help in some cases by adding more green space to that waterfront area. So, yeah, it'll be good to, again, get those facts out there. Any other items from the board? Anyone else wants to be heard on? Okay, well, I had just a couple of comments, and it's more just informational. I know we have Earth Day coming up, so everybody enjoy Earth Day. Was it the 24th, I believe? But I think everybody here on the board celebrates Earth Day every day, right? And there's a paper shredding event April 27th, and I believe a lot of that paper that is shred will be then used for recycling, or will be recycled. So if anyone has a lot of post-tax documents that they need to get rid of or shred, that might be a good opportunity. And then there's a tree giveaway at Public Works, April 27th. It's always a great opportunity to get a couple of trees to freshen up the yard or someone else's yard. And there's the e-waste recycling at the Solid Waste Center too, every last Wednesday. So if you have an old VCR and you want to get rid of it, that's a good place and a good time to do that. And there's a Sugar Sand Festival, Keep Pinellas Beautiful Beach Cleanup. So I'm sure there's plenty of cigarette butts to be removed. That's April 22nd on a Monday. So, yeah, plenty of things to do to help the environment until our next meeting. So with that, I'll adjourn. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lisa.